I'm good.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you all for coming on such short notice. My name is Reverend Robin Lund, and I am the Executive Director of the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists. We're an association of 98 member churches across the U.S. who've gone on record as welcoming and affirming all persons without regard to sexual orientation or gender identity. These churches have joined together to advocate for the full inclusion of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender persons within Baptist communities of faith. We have come here today as Baptist leaders who represent communities, institutions, and fellowships throughout the United States in response to the Ethics and Religious Liberty Conference entitled The Gospel, Homosexuality, and the Future of Marriage. And in particular, the workshop being offered on October 28th entitled Reconcilable Differences, Building Bridges with Those Who Disagree About Marriage. As Baptists from across the spectrum of expressions of our tradition, we honor and respect the freedoms inherent in our faith, freedoms which allow us to hold divergent opinions on scriptural interpretation and the autonomy of the local church. However, our tradition also demands that we engage in dialogue across these differences in order for the Spirit to shape us into a more Christ-like fellowship. For over 40 years, the welcoming and affirming movement within the Baptist tradition has been collecting people who, like the famous Baptist missionaries Adoniram and Ann Judson in the 18th century, came to believe in a new way of being church, one that embraced people and created a family of love and welcome and inclusion. For over 40 years, Baptists from across our diversity of expressions have come to welcome and affirm gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people as fellow believers and beloved members of God's family. For over 20 years, same-gender loving couples have been being blessed by our pastors and loved by our churches. We know that this is not the experience of most Baptists, and I would like to invite Reverend Mike Greer up first to speak about his experience as a lifelong Southern Baptist pastor and missionary.
Thank you, Robin. My name is Mike Greer. I'm a retired Baptist pastor who now resides in Frankfort, Kentucky. For 35 years, I've pastored Southern Baptist churches. For 5 years, I was a missionary, SBC appointed missionary in the West Bank, in the Middle East. I was baptized at age 9 at the Southern Baptist Church in Ohio. I was educated at the Southern Baptist College and the Southern Baptist Seminary. In every church I pastored, I was privileged to serve LGBTQ congregants, their friends, and their families. We are here today to remind ourselves and all Baptists around the world that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are not issues. They are not cultural anomalies. They are fellow human beings who should always be treated with dignity and respect. They are our family, our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, and our fellow church members. They are our siblings in the faith, and they are fellow children of our God, our loving and gracious Creator. They are our fellow Americans, and as such, they deserve full and equal access to the blessings and privileges of marriage. In my decades as a pastor, I've heard countless accounts, first-hand accounts, about how my brothers and sisters have been bullied, stigmatized, dehumanized, disowned, stereotyped, and discriminated against. To my chagrin, all too often, this abuse has been justified or encouraged by Christian appeals to scriptures, and this in direct contradiction to the spirit of the very Jesus we all claim we want to emulate. Across the globe, LGBTQ human beings are subjected to verbal, emotional, spiritual, and physical abuse. Some are even imprisoned or murdered simply because they are different in their sexual orientation. In this culture, The forms of dehumanization, whether blatant or subtle, are devastating. Our first task as Baptists is to work together to deinstitutionalize all oppressions based on sexual orientation. In America, LGBTQ youth now make up 40% of our homeless youth population. Some of these precious youth who hear a constant message of denunciation, and this sometimes reinforced even by the church, despair at the weight of their rejection and take their lives. As a pastor, I find this unacceptable. We are here today to call on all Baptists to work together to change the social, political, and religious dynamics that contribute to the alienation and destruction of these precious lives. I lament the reality that LGBTQ human beings have been mistreated and misinterpreted in the interest of our raging culture wars. But I am pleased and encouraged that Dr. Russell Moore has called all Southern Baptists to open a new chapter and to relate to the LGBTQ community with kindness. I wish to lend my voice to AWAB's call for constructive and respectful dialogue between Southern Baptists and the larger LGBTQ community.
Thank you, Reverend. These families are our families. These are families in our Baptist churches, our PTAs, our soccer leagues, our garden clubs. These families want to do the right thing in the eyes of the church and the eyes of God. These families have been taught that their child, their sibling, their parent, their spouse is sick or deviant. And for decades they've been taught that there is no place for their beloved family member. No place for their child who might be gay. No place for their sister who is a lesbian. They must choose between their church and their family member. And this is a dangerous choice that has deep and lasting consequences. And I'd like to invite Reverend David Weasley to speak about those consequences.
So Jesus said, "Foxes have their holes, and the birds of the air have their nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." I serve on the board for the Association of Welcoming and Affirming Baptists, and one of the things I've done since I've been serving on that board is I had the good fortune to work for the night ministry in Chicago for several years. Night ministry does a variety of ministry with folks experiencing homelessness. Today I want to talk about the Crib, an overnight youth shelter on the north side of Chicago. So tonight at 8:45 p.m., the Crib staff will open up the door. And it's pretty warm down here, but it's starting to get cold in Chicago, so there will be a line of 18 to 24-year-olds in the little church parking lot there on Addison Street. And everybody will put their name into a bucket, and they'll draw names out of the bucket until they fill the 22 beds at the Crib. Most nights, especially when it starts to get cold, there's well over 22 folks outside that church basement. And so those folks have to find other places to stay. Sometimes they can find other shelters, but a lot of times they have to do some pretty dangerous things in order to be warm for the night. You know, I've been working for AWAB for a long time. I'm a member of a church that joined AWAB, and that's been a vital part of our ministry in reaching out to LGBTQ folks. But there was a new fire, there was a new drive to this ministry when I started getting to know some of the young people who have to sleep out so often, or who have to find other dangerous places to stay there with the night ministry. It is heartbreaking to me. It is heartbreaking to me to know that some of those young people who have been forced to leave their homes and seek out these more dangerous places to stay are coming from Baptist homes, are coming from families who think that what they're learning in church, who think that the way they're reading the Bible demands that they ask their children to leave or behave even more violently towards them. It is my deep hope that the conversations happening today and the conversations that will come out of this conference and beyond will help us move towards the day when we're all clear that no matter what you think about what Scripture says about sexuality or gender identity, you should keep providing a safe place for your young people to stay. It is my deep hope that the conversations we start today will work to build a world where at 8:45 p.m. on some night, hopefully in the not too distant